Hey guys, it's Chris here. In today's tutorial, you're going to learn about Firebase Authentication. Specifically, we're going to build a login page together that is going to accept an email and password that the user can use to create an account or to sign in. Now, eventually, we're going to deal with all of the different Firebase authentication methods like Google sign in and Facebook login and stuff like that. But in today's lesson, we're going to look at email and password specifically. Okay, so the best part about it all is that it's actually not very hard, as you're going to find out. Now, before we get started, there's one thing I want to say. I'm going to try something a little different in today's video, and that is one lucky subscriber, and it could be you, is going to win the app or game of their choice from their app store. Now, if the winner turns out to be you, you're going to be able to pick any app or game. I'm going to buy it with my own money, and then I'm going to gift it to you. So watch to the end of this video to find out how that lucky subscriber could be you. Okay, so with that said, let's get started. So we're going to start by creating a brand new Xcode project. It's going to be a single view application, and I'm going to call this custom email login. Now, most of these settings you should have already if you've built any other apps before, but you should just double check that the language is Swift, okay? I'm going to click next, save it on my desktop, and that's all we want to do right here. Now we're going to jump into the Firebase side of things because we want to create that Firebase app that is going to store our users. So let's create a new project in Firebase, and I'm going to call this custom email login. And I'm just going to change this to Canada. Now we're going to click add Firebase to your iOS app. So this bundle ID, we're just going to quickly jump back into Xcode here. This is our bundle identifier. You can get to this page from clicking here under general, and that's where the bundle identifier is. Now paste it into there, and you can give this a nickname, email login. I'm going to add the app. Now it's going to create a configuration file for us to download, and it should start automatically. I'm going to save it on my desktop there. And we're going to add this into our project just by simply clicking and dragging this guy into Xcode. Now, make sure copy items if needed is checked on so that it copies it into our project folder, and click finish. So now that it's there, let's go back here, continue, and now we have to install the Firebase libraries with CocoaPods. And this is stuff that we should have done before in the previous Firebase lessons. Not for this project, but I mean, you should know how to do this. So I'm going to close out this Xcode project. I'm going to open up Terminal, and then I'm going to navigate to my project folder. So it is custom, and you can press tab to complete the folder name for you. And here I am inside my project folder. So I'm going to type in pod space init. And if I open up my project folder, now I have a pod file. So I'm just going to open this in my text editor. And here we're going to add some Firebase libraries. So Firebase core, we need that. So we're going to paste it down here, but we're also going to need another one. So let's go to the documentation. So I'm just going to click continue here, and we're going to do that in a sec. But what I want to do is jump to the documentation, and I want to show you the different Firebase libraries we can add. So under documentation, this get started guide is really helpful. We're going to need this under authentication as well. But what I want to go through here is down here, just under iOS, under Get Started, the Available Pods section tells you kind of which pods you need to add depending on which features you want to use. So we're dealing with authentication now. We also want to add this pod as well. So go ahead and copy that and paste that under there. I'm going to save it, and we can jump back into Terminal, and we can do a pod install. So it's going to go ahead, and it's going to do that really fast because it did it before. I've done this before. But for you, it might actually take a while. It might actually take 10, 15 minutes, 5 minutes, however long it takes to download all of this stuff. Furthermore, if you get an error message that's saying something like your CocoaPod libraries are out of date or something like that, you can simply go back to the first lesson in this series and then just install CocoaPods again, and it's going to actually update the files. And then you can come back here and you can do a pod install. For us now, everything's good to go. We're going to go back to our project folder, and now we're going to open up our XC workspace file. And inside this file, we need to configure it for Firebase. That last step, which we skipped a couple of minutes ago. So import Firebase here in your app-delegate.swift, and then under here, before the return statement, we're going to say fire app, and notice we have a fire auth now. So fire app.configure. Okay, so now we have our Xcode project connecting to this this Firebase app that we have on Firebase. Okay, so we're jumping back and forth, but this is kind of necessary. We're going to set up the authentication method for our app first. So if you click authentication here, you can go to sign-in methods. Right now, everything is disabled. We're going to enable email and password. Okay, so go ahead and save that. And now it would be very helpful for us to have the authentication documentation handy. So under there, under authentication, iOS and password authentication, it's telling us to do pod Firebase Auth, but guess what? We already did that. So we can jump straight to this part. In fact, we already did this, in the app delegate, fire app configure, we did that. And here's the thing to note. We are looking at this one, create user with email. Okay, so that's using fire auth, right? We're going to create a new user using that function by passing in the email and the password. And for sign in, we are going to do this one, sign in with email and password like that. So now back to our Xcode project. We need to create some sort of UI that contains some text fields for the user to enter in their email or password. So let's jump into the storyboard and quickly do that. So I'm going to move kind of quickly here. And if you can't follow along or you're having trouble following along, check in the description below the video for the link to this project, and you can just download the Xcode project and look at the source code and run it and play with that. So background, I'm going to choose this green. I really like this green for some reason. It reminds me of Evernote, which I really like, except that it went paid and I stopped using it, so now I'm using OneNote, but I would really prefer to use Evernote if I had the money to pay for it. So first we're going to start with a segmented control, and this control is going to let us choose sign in or register. So I'm going to change the title for the first segment to sign in. I'm going to toggle to the second segment here, and I'm going to call it register. And then we're going to have a label right underneath that, and this label is going to be just saying either sign in or register. I'm going to make this text white, and next we're going to have some other labels actually. So we're going to have a label here that says this is the email field. Again, I'm going to change that to white. I have a label here, and this is going to be for the password, and the color is going to be white as well. And then we're going to do text field. We're going to add two text fields, one for the email, one for the password like that. And finally, we're going to have a button. Now this is all going to come together soon, I promise. This button, I'm going to call it sign in for now. Okay, so now let's just put some of this stuff into stack views. First of all, we're going to add these two things into a stack view. It's going to be a horizontal stack view, and it's going to squish it like that for now. That's going to be fine. We're going to add these two, put it into a stack view by clicking this button below. So now both of these guys are in horizontal stack views, as you can see from this document outline. And now we're going to highlight all of these elements. I forgot to mention, you can highlight elements by holding down the command button and clicking each one. But it's going to be very hard. It might be a little difficult. Okay, so I've selected them all like that. Another way you can do it is simply, probably easier, is to highlight that guy, hold down shift, and then click the last element. It's just going to highlight it all. Before you pop these guys into a stack view itself, I want to make sure that you have the correct order, because once we pop it into a stack view, the order matters. So the first element on top here, I want you to have the segmented control, and then the sign-in label, and then the stack view for the email, stack view for the password, and then the sign-in button lastly. So if you have that order and you have them all highlighted like I do, now you can click this stack view button. And now it's going to dump it all into a stack view. It's all squished. It's fine. We're going to add some constraints to this guy first. So highlight that stack view. We're going to go down here. We're going to vertically center it in the container. And we're going to add some constraints so that it, left and right specifically, 0, 0, so that it hugs the two edges there. I'm going to add these two constraints. And now I'm going to update frames, and now it's going to sit in the middle. Furthermore, we're going to change the spacing to 30 to spread them out a bit. And we're going to change the alignment to center. So you see all the elements here are aligned to the left. I'm going to change that to center so they're all center aligned. And as for the email and password fields, they're so squished, right? So highlight this stack view with the email, and we're going to have to give it an idea of what its width should be. So we're going to put 0, 0 for the left and right constraints, so it reaches all the way across like that. Okay, and for the second stack view, for the password one, I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to do that. And lastly, let's add some spacing. Let's work on the password stack view first. So select the stack view with the password and the text field in it, and give it a spacing. Give it like 20, something like that. And for the email one, I'm going to have to play with this a little bit, just so 40, maybe 60. That's too much. 55, something like that. Maybe it's 50. That looks about right to me. If you want to be precise about it, you can spend a little more time on it. Now, what we're going to do is we're going to connect all of these elements to our view controller via IB outlets so that we can manipulate them, we can read its values and stuff like that. So go ahead and click Assistant Editor up here. And usually I tend to run out of space. So I'm going to use this document outline to connect my outlets. Now create some space up here because that's where we're going to do our outlets. Hold down Control, click and drag this segmented control over here and create an outlet. I'm going to call this my, let's call it the sign-in selector. And for the label here, we're going to add an outlet for that. I'm going to call this the sign-in label. And for this email text field, we're going to need that. So we can call this the email text field. We're going to need the password text field. Password text field. Okay, and this sign-in button right here. And this part, sign-in button. Oh, did I spell that wrong? Sign-in button. In this part, when you're connecting the outlets, some people end up making mistakes. Maybe they make a typo or they end up dragging the wrong element. For example, if I was dragging the text field, I might have accidentally did it for the label instead. And so people get into these weird states where the wrong things are connected, and it's going to work right now, but when you run your app, things are going to go bad. Or when you try to like assign text or read the text from this property right here, it's not going to work because it's actually a label and not a text field because you connected the wrong thing. So in order to fix that, all you need to do is you can go in your document outline, you can right click it, and you can see what property this element is connected to. So you can see here for my password text field, if I right click it, it is connected to this outlet called password text field. If I had connected my label, I would see it. If I right click my label here, I would see something here connected to that property. All you need to do is click the little X to break that connection. So for example, I'm going to do this with my password text field. I'm going to click this little X, break the connection, and now it's not connected to anything. In fact, you can see this little circle, this little dot is not filled in, which means this property is not connected to an element. So now what you can do is right click your text field and then click this little circle under beside new referencing outlet, as you can see there in Faint. Let's drag it up to here and then choose the property. And here, don't make the mistake and connect it to the wrong property. Don't connect it to the email text field, or else you're going to have to fix things again. Connect it to password text field. Okay, so that's just a little segue to tell you about that. We also want to handle a couple of events. So for example, if the user selects sign in versus register, we want to know about that. So hold down Control, click and drag it down to here under override function did receive memory warning. This time we're not adding an outlet, we're adding an action, okay? And this is sign in selector changed. For the type, I'm gonna choose segmented control, just so the parameter is of type of segmented control. We're not done yet. We need to add another action under sign in button. Okay, so we're gonna add an action, and this is going to be sign in button tapped, and the type is UI button. Connect. You should see something like that. Now, so far, all we've been doing is hooking up our user interface. We haven't actually done anything with Firebase yet. Now, this could have been a separate video in itself, and that's why I'm moving kind of fast, because I don't want to spend that much time on just the user interface, because the point of this video is to show you guys how to do Firebase authentication. But that pretty much does it for our UI. Okay, so let's write a little bit of code right here. When the user taps on this segmented control and changes it from sign in or register, that matters to us, right? Because when the user hits this button, we need to know if we're telling Firebase to register a new user, as in create a new user, or to try and sign in a user, right? So we need to keep track of whether the user has the sign in tab highlighted or the register tab highlighted. Now, what you can do is you can just check the sign in selector to see if segment 1 is selected or segment 2 is selected. And because you know segment 1 is, sorry, I think it's segment 0, because the index for the segments start at 0. Segment 0 is sign in, segment 1 is register. But you have to know that. And it might be unclear for someone else who is reading your code. So what I like to do is just a little more work. It might be a little extra code, but I find that it's worth the clarity that it provides. So I'm going to create a Boolean variable just to signify if it's sign in or not. And to start, I'm going to set it to true, because by default it is set to sign in. And when the sign in selector has changed, I basically say is sign in. I'm just going to need to flip this from true to false or false to true. And one trick you can do is you can just add that exclamation mark, which represents, which stands for not. So if I do this, it's just going to say is sign in is equal to the opposite of whatever is sign in right now. So if it's true, this is going to flip it to false and assign it back here. So this is flip the Boolean. Okay, and here you're going to check the bool and set the button and labels. Okay, so because if is sign in, we're going to want to say the sign in label dot text is equal to sign in, and the sign in button dot let's do set title is sign in. For control state, press dot, let's choose normal, and otherwise we want to say the sign in label dot text is equal to register, and the sign in button dot set title to register for control state normal. Okay, so that's going to handle our UI. Now this is the fun part. Here we want to say check if it's sign in or register. So again, we do if it is sign in, right? Then sign in the user with Firebase, else register the user with Firebase. Okay, so now we can jump back to the documentation here. Before we can actually use the sign in or the create user functions, our view controller needs to know about the Firebase classes and libraries. So we need to go up here above view controller and just import Firebase and import Firebase Auth. Do I not need to do that? I might just need that. So here we can do Firebase Auth dot auth like that, and we can pretty much just follow this, right? Where are we here? Sign in, right? We can pretty much just follow this. So you can do fireauth.auth.signin, and autocomplete is going to be really nice here. So just press enter. So we need to provide it with the email and the password as 2 strings, and then we can open up this completion closure to handle the result. Okay, so before we pass in the email and the password, what we want to do is probably just check that the fields aren't nil or if they aren't empty. In fact, you would probably want to do some form validation on the email and password just to make sure that they're correct. And especially if you're registering a new user with Firebase, you want to make sure that their password is secure and contains a certain number of characters or capitals or whatnot, then you would probably want to do some validation. But I'm not going to do all of that in this lesson because my main focus is wanting to show you guys these Firebase authentication functions here. So I'm just going to leave this as a to-do, or maybe we'll do it in a follow-up lesson or maybe a separate lesson to teach you guys how to do some validation. But here I'm just going to do a basic check to see if email and password are both filled in. So we can use optional binding on the text fields. So if let email equals email text field dot text, comma, and pass equals password text field like that. And inside here, I know that both of those fields are filled in. So I'm just going to copy this, and we're only going to do this if those 2 fields are filled in. So here I can simply pass an email, email like that, and here I can pass in pass like that. Okay, so here for this completion closure, I'm going to double click it, and that's going to open up the closure. I'm going to, this parameter is going to contain the user, which notice is an optional, and the error is also an optional. So user and error. If the sign in was successful, then we should get a user. So we can check that. Check that user isn't nil. If let u equals user, then user is found. Go to home screen or wherever you want to send the user after. Else error, check error, or check error and show message. For registering a user down here, we're going to use the fireauth.auth.create user with email and password. So again, we just pass in the email, use pass, and for this completion closure, double click it. Again, it has the same thing. So user error. So if let u equal user, check that user isn't nil. user is found, go to home screen, else error, check error and show message. Okay, so that should be it. Now what we need to do is in our main storyboard, we need to add another screen for them to actually visit after they've completed the sign-in or registration. So I'm going to add another view controller here, and I'm very simply going to just set the color and add a label and just say you're in. Change that to white, and then we're going to center that label horizontally and vertically inside this container. Update frames, so that's it. And how are they going to get from this view controller to this one? Well, we can create a manual segue. So up here, I'm going to click this guy, hold down Control on my keyboard, drag it over here, and click Show. It's going to create this segue here that we manually invoke, but we got to give it an identifier. So call this go to home. Let's go back to the view controller, and now we can invoke it after the user has logged in. So there's something wrong here. Cannot convert value of type UI text field. My mistake here. What we want to check is the text property of the text field. I forgot to do that for this password. We want to be grabbing the text from the text field and checking if that is nil. Okay, so now that gets rid of all of those errors. So if the user isn't nil, we're going to go to the home screen by invoking that segue we just added. So perform segue with identifier, go to home, and the sender is self. And the sender is basically who is calling or performing that segue, and self is this view controller. So that's why I have that there. And perform segue is a function of view controller, but because this code is inside of a closure here, we need to use the self keyword like that. Okay, so self dot perform segue, go to home, self. All right, so now we're ready to try this out. Let's run the project and keep an eye on our Firebase app in the users section here. Let me just separate this into two little windows like that. All right, so one thing that I might not have done, we'll see if it happens, but the keyboard might block the sign in button, which is ironic because I just did a video on that. So we're just gonna register that. I forgot to add the code to dismiss the keyboard. So we're gonna choose register first, okay? I'm gonna put in my email. If you guys wanna send me some fan mail, go on right ahead. And actually this password, this is kind of embarrassing because my password is going to be seen by everyone. We got to set this password to secure text entry. All right, so we're going to do that in just a sec. So I'm going to click register, and hopefully that populates the user here. Reload. Boom. All right, there's our user. So there's my email for everyone to see. This message here, you're in. All right, cool. So let's stop the project. Let's go back to the storyboard. Let's change this text field to secure text entry. Okay, right now I have the password text field selected, secure text entry. Boom. Okay, and what we also want to add in the view controller.swift down here, and this is getting sticky because we have so many brackets here that you can get, pretty confused, but make sure that you put it, if you want to start a new function, the safest way, just grab the last bracket and put it above that. Okay, but another thing you can do is you can start separating your functions into different sections using the mark keyword. I'll show you guys that another time. So we want to override the touches began, and we want to say email text field, resign first responder, and password text field, resign first responder. And this is just going to dismiss the keyboard when the view is tapped on. Okay, so now let's run it again and try to sign in with this new user that we created. All right, we're under sign in here, and moment of truth. Let's go here, sign in. Boom, we're in. All right, so that's gonna do it for our email and password authentication with Firebase. Now, we did a lot of work just building this demo, just building the UI, building, you know, all the forms and arranging them into a form with auto layout and stuff. The actual part of connecting to Firebase to create a user or sign in a user was actually pretty simple, wouldn't you agree? So, you know, even though this video was long, I mean, most of the work was just to build our UI here. In fact, when I was reading the documentation in Firebase, they also had some sort of pre-built UI that you could use. Maybe we'll take a look at that. So these drop-in authentication solution, Firebase UI Auth. Maybe we'll take a look at that in the future, but I want to show you guys how to build in a login form and how to sign in users and create users using email and password authentication. So I hope you were able to build this out for yourself. If you weren't able to, or you just want to download the project, check the link below in the description of the video for downloading this Xcode project. So I hope you enjoyed that tutorial. Now let me tell you about how you can win the app or game of your choice. So number one, you have to be a subscriber. It goes without saying, so hit that subscribe button below if you're not already. Number two is give this video a like by hitting the thumbs up button below the video as well. And lastly, comment below by answering this question. What is just one app or game that you can't live without? So let me know. The only rule I have for this contest or giveaway is that the app or game that you choose cannot exceed $10 USD. Now the reason I say that is to give more people chances to win the more I do this. Because if I don't put a cap on it, there's some apps or games out there that are like $20, $30, I'm gonna go broke. So there's still a lot of things you can buy for $10 USD, and I hope you guys enjoy it. Oh yeah, one last thing. I'm gonna choose the winner randomly and I'll reveal who that is in the next video. So stay tuned, make sure you watch that video to find out who wins. And probably also for another chance to win as well. Okay, so thanks for watching. I'll see you guys in the next lesson. Bye for now.